I'm LGBTQ. I came out at 14. And from there on, I had some challenges in high school, and that's why I guess I became a punk rock kid, because they're one of the most welcoming communities in the entire world.
Today, I'm pleased to have our guest, Chase Oliver. As you may know, the Libertarians have qualified for 37 states, including battleground states of Arizona, Georgia, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Michigan. And with a tight race between the Republicans and Democrats, the Libertarian vote may come into play. So let's get to know you a little bit more. Can you tell me a little bit about where you grew up, your family life, sort of like how did you get to be you?
Yeah, so born in Nashville, Tennessee. That's where most of my extended family lives. But I moved down to the metro Atlanta area with my family when I was 7. That's where I've been most of my life, is in and around the city of Atlanta. I grew up in a little city called Snellville, Georgia. And attended Brookwood High School, was the band nerd in high school.
What did you play in the band?
I was in the drum line, actually. I was and while I loved the drums, I actually mostly did what was called the pit instruments. So like xylophone and marimba and things like that. So really enjoyed that aspect. Gave me a community in high school. I was one of the punk rock kids in high school. Had a mohawk at one point in time.
What music were you into when you say punk rock? I mean, you're kind of younger than I am, but what was punk back in your day?
Oh yeah, man. So I used to go to like NoFX and Rancid and Bad Religion and the Dropkick Murphys, generally that kind of era of the punk rock, ska, there's a lot of stuff that kind of melds into that scene.
Did you touch back into like the Specials with the Ramones, any of that old school? Yeah,
absolutely. Love
Joy Division.
Yeah, Joy Division. Even if you want to even go to things like the Dead Kennedys. I mean, there's a lot of awesome bands from back in the day. So yeah, I was kind of a punk rocker kid. And then, I came out at, I'm LGBTQ. I came out at 14. And from there on, I had some challenges in high school, and that's why I guess I became a punk rock kid, because they're one of the most welcoming communities in the entire world, is the punk rock community.
So when did you give up the mohawk? Was that recent?
I gave up the mohawk in my 20s, after high school.
Did you just look in the mirror and say, it's not working anymore?
That, and then I just felt like, if I wanted to get a better job, maybe, and it didn't last forever. Like I had the mohawk for here and there. Mostly it was just close shaved head kind of a thing. But yeah, eventually you're like, you know what? I can either have the mohawk or I can have a job that gives me a 401k.
Costs money to breathe, right? So you got to make those choices. You got to
do what you got to do sometimes.
So tell me about your family dynamic. Obviously, as you said, you came out when you were 14. What was that reaction like? Was your family like, let's go? Or were they like, what was that?
I would say it was an adjustment period. Lots of American families, particularly at that time, it was an adjustment period. Parents didn't really understand that stuff, and then they had to learn on the job kind of a thing. Luckily today, kids grow up in a much more approving world, I think. But for me, I had 2 awesome parents who, they're my biggest supporters in the world.
What lessons did you take away from your upbringing that you sort of apply on a daily basis? Is there some sort of ethos that is inside of you that your parents and the support around you gave you?
Yeah, well, I came from a family that was deeply involved in the faith community. I'm from the South. A lot of our values come from that place of faith. And so that's where a lot of my life lessons were instilled in me. Things like empathy and love for your fellow neighbor, not looking down on other people, walking a mile in someone else's shoes. These are the kind of ethoses that have formed my kind of, philosophy and my kind of values of like, love your fellow man. I literally wear my heart right here on my sleeve. It's something that means a lot to me, loving other people. And that's the most important value that I think my parents gave me, which is don't look down on others, because just because they live differently than you doesn't mean they live better or worse than you.
Let's talk a little bit about policy on issues like abortion and immigration. Can you sort of specify what your positions are on that?
With abortion, we'll take those one by one. So with abortion, I come at it from a bodily autonomy perspective. I believe that if you are a person, you have the security of your own body and your own person, and that extends to the right to privacy, for medical privacy, but also just the right to not have to be, not have to undergo pregnancy if you don't wish to. That at that point, it is your body and up to the point of viability. When there's a viability standard, that means there's two lives now involved. You have a viable fetus that could be delivered. At that point, it should only be the life of the mother that requires that bodily autonomy standard.
It
And
sounds
so,
as if, like
mhm.
on that particular issue, it's just not let the states decide. You actually propose maybe federal legislation to sort of enshrine that right.
Yes.
Is that your position?
Yeah, because I believe, ultimately with this particular issue, whether you come at it from the pro-choice, the pro-life side, it would need to be a 50-state solution. And the reason being, I look to the 14th and the Fifth Amendment for these protections that women should have. But even if you're pro-life and you believe abortion is murder, well, then you should want it to be outlawed in all 50 states, right? It doesn't make sense to say, well, some states will have murder and some states won't. If you believe that, I don't believe abortion is murder. I believe abortion is a person's right to choose their bodily autonomy and their reproductive health.
Let's talk a little bit about immigration. That seems to be another issue.
So I support the Ellis Island model of immigration, basically, for the 21st century. So boil that down to, if you want to come into this country, come through a port of entry, declare who you are, because that way we can know if you're wanted for a crime that requires us to exercise our extradition treaties, which we have with countries all over the world. We would want them to exercise the same treaty if someone was coming into their nation. So we have to exercise that bare, background check of someone coming in. Of course, if they're wanted, they can always claim for asylum too and go through that process. But for most people, they should be able to come right in, get to work, start a job, be a guest worker in this country. Particularly for seasonal farm labor, this would allow people to go to and from, one side of the border to the other.
So you said you'd love to run against former President Donald Trump. What's the first thing you're going to go after him on?
Well, I think the first thing we really need to go after Trump on is, hit him where he's really weakest, which is the fact that he's the guy who initiated the COVID spending, the COVID lockdowns, these kind of draconian policies that eliminated millions of small businesses in this country that have not come back. And also, while doing that, blew up the debt and the deficit. And so he tries to act like Joe Biden was the worst on COVID. He initiated all of the things that Joe Biden did. But the other things that I would want to hit him on is, obviously, his immigration policy was terrible. It led to the human rights abuses that we're still seeing on our southern border. That Joe Biden has not really fixed either. And if you're wondering what I'm going to hit Joe Biden on, it's the fact that he ran against all of these policies of Donald Trump, his protectionist policies, where he's literally doubled and tripled down on the tariffs on China just yesterday, announcing that he's going to double down or triple down on Donald Trump's policies. The spending hasn't gotten that under control. So many things and then the immigration policy that he's not undone. So many things that Joe Biden ran against Trump on, he's just continued or doubled down on.
When we look at the last presidential election, the Libertarian candidate got a little bit more than 2% of the popular vote. 2% ain't going to get you the cake on the day, right? So who do you think you're going to take more votes away? It seems like you have very policies that are somewhat more aligned with Biden. So by attacking Trump, are you going to take Biden votes, Trump votes? Where do you pull popular vote from?
I think we pull popular vote from the independent pool of voters, which both parties gain a certain percentage of, right? Independents don't just go, oh, there's only Republican and Democrat. So, they usually fall one way or the other. But that's where my largest pool of voters came from when I ran for the United States Senate and exit polling. It was political independence. And I think that's where we're going to get that soft support from both Trump and Biden, where we can peel off. In particular, I think you're going to get those maybe people who voted for Biden in 2020 and who are outraged by our policy in Gaza right now and backing Israel the way we are. You're going to see a lot of young Gen Z voters who are not happy to vote for Joe Biden in 2024. Let's give them a place to go, an anti-war person. You might be someone who voted for Donald Trump in 2020, but you've just seen the complete breakdown in the way he wants to treat the Constitution, the rule of law, and you want somebody who's going to stand up for the constitutional processes. Well, I believe in playing the rules that are put on the board, and that is the U.S. Constitution. And so love it or leave it. And so I think there will be Republican voters who want to come to a sane choice that isn't just so bombastic. And I think there's room to steal from both of them, really.
Anything else you'd like to share with our loyal listeners?
Well, the main thing that I'd like to share with you is that I'm looking to reach out to voters who have been very dissatisfied with the choices they have in front of them, particularly young people, Gen Z and millennials. My generation is the generation that had to fight the war on terror for 20 years. My generation is the one that had to recover after the real estate market fell out in 2008. And we're seeing many of the same mistakes being repeated for Gen Z. And if we want to stop that from happening, millennials and Gen Z need to rise up as a voting bloc. 40% of the voters will be Gen Z and millennials. You need to rise up and demand something different than Donald Trump and Joe Biden. I can be that choice for you.
All right. Thank you very much, Chase. We wish you the best of luck and hope you come back again and chat with us.
Thank you so much. Peace, love, and liberty to you and your audience.